Chapter 3. The tattooed boy sat on the floor of the prison room aboard Prince Zuko's Fire Nation warship. He wasn't sure how he would get out of this room or off this ship, but he did know that he had done the right thing by giving himself up to save the entire village full of people. The monks had taught him well, and their values and rules were now an integral part of who he was. There were lives at stake, and now they were safe. That was all that mattered. He took a deep breath and continued to meditate. Suddenly, the door to the prison room swung open. In walked Prince Zuko, accompanied by a man in his early 50s. The man's grey hair was so long it reached the middle of his back, and his eyes radiated a gentle kindness. The prince remained in the corner of the room, hidden among the shadows. The older man approached the boy. "What do you want with me?" the boy asked softly. "My nephew wants me to perform a little test on you," the man said. His voice sounded as kind as his face appeared. "What kind of test?" the boy asked suspiciously. "I assure you that it won't hurt," the man said. "I've performed it hundreds of times. It will only take a few minutes, and then you will be free to go." The boy stared hard at the older man, then glanced towards the prince, who remained in the shadows. Zuko said nothing. "Would you mind if I put a few things in front of you?" the man continued, gesturing to a small table in the centre of the room. "It will only take a moment." "That's all you want?" the boy asked, trying to figure out exactly what was going on. "That is all," the man said. "My name is Oro, and you have my word." The boy nodded, still unsure of what was to come. He stood, then walked to the table and took a seat. Oro went to the corner of the room and brought back a tray which sat 3 objects. He placed the tray on the table in front of the boy. He took the first item, a candle, and lit it. The flame flickered and danced atop the wax pillar. The man then placed the candle directly in front of the boy. The flame stopped flickering at once. It grew long and thin and perfectly still. Oro moved his hand slightly, and the flame went out. Next he picked up a small jug of water and poured a small amount onto the table. It spread in all directions, creating an irregular shaped puddle. Then after a moment the water began to move, forming into a perfect circle. Oro stared at the boy, then turned to look at his nephew in the corner. He wiped the water off the table. Oro took the final object, a small slender rock, from the tray. He balanced the rock on its thin edge and let go. The rock stayed perfectly balanced on its edge when all logic and the laws of gravity said it should have toppled over. Prince Zuko stepped from the shadows, walking right up to the boy and breaking the long silence in the room. "You are my prisoner, boy," he snarled. "I'm taking you back to the Fire Nation." The confused boy looked directly at Oro. "But you said I could." "I apologise," Oro said, clearly upset at having to break his word. "I should have explained that if you failed the test, as all others did, you would have been free to leave. But as it turns out, you are the only one in the entire world who could pass." He paused for a moment, then brought his hands together in front of him and bowed slightly. "It is truly an honour to be in your presence." Prince Zuko shoved past his uncle. "Don't even try to escape," he warned the boy. "This is a warship. The room is made entirely of impregnable metal. There are armed guards outside the room, and my uncle and I are expert firebenders. So any thought you have of escape is..." The boy moved with astonishing swiftness. He leapt to his feet, kicked off his chair with one foot, and then sprung off the table with his other. Floating as if weightless, he landed with his back to the door, which opened inward into the room. "Stop!" cried Zuko. "There is no way you can—" The boy brought his hands together in a smooth, practised motion and pushed them forward. Immediately, a powerful gust of wind rushed through the room. The force of the wind tossed the boy backwards through the open doorway, then slammed the door shut on Zuko and Oro. Out in the hallway, a group of Fire Nation guards pointed their spears at the boy. He planted his feet and began pulling at the air in a hand-over-hand motion, as if he were pulling an invisible rope. Violently rushing air tore through the hallway, pinning the guards against the wall. The boy rode the speeding wind currents down the hall and snatching his staff as he passed it. Bounding up a set of metal stairs, he emerged onto the deck of the mighty warship. The ship slid slowly through a narrow ice valley, making its way towards the vast ocean. The metallic clang of footsteps rang out behind him. The boy looked around. He was trapped. He had nowhere to go. From above came a familiar and welcoming sound, the unmistakable sound of a sky bison. "Roar!" wailed Appa. "Appa!" cried the boy. Looking up, he spotted Appa standing on a high ridge of ice ahead of the ship. Seated on the bison's back were Sokka and Katara. Fire Nation guards burst from the stairwell, followed closely by Zuko and Oro. The boy flicked his wrists, shaking his staff. 2 wings emerged from either side of the long pole. "Don't move," ordered Zuko. "You have nowhere to run." The boy dashed towards the edge of the ship, picking up speed with every step. Although he reached the edge, he kept going, running right off the deck. He disappeared from view, but the expected splash of him crashing into the ocean never came. "What?" the prince cried out. "Where? He's gone. Where did he go?" The boy suddenly reappeared, rising up into the sky, gliding along on his winged staff like a bird riding the air currents. From the deck of his ship, Prince Zuko watched the boy fly towards the sky bison, who was waiting on the nearby ledge. "I underestimated him, Uncle, because he looked like a boy," the prince said bitterly. "I won't do that again." He shook his head, furious at himself. "I had him, Uncle. For a moment, I had my honour back." Oro placed a hand gently on his nephew's shoulder. "It's not by chance that for generations people have been searching for him, and that you were the one to see that light and find him," he said softly, trying to comfort the distraught prince. "Your destinies are tied, Zuko. That I can be sure of. But where has the Avatar been for 100 years? Chapter 4. The young airbender drifted down through the sky, using the air currents for resistance until he landed on Appa's back. "Aurora!" the sky bison wailed happily. "It's good to see you too, buddy," the boy answered gleefully, scratching the huge beast on the top of his furry head. Then he turned to Sokka and Katara, who sat behind him. The two just stared back at him in shock. "You came just in time," the boy said. "Thanks." "Oh, I'm Katara. That's my brother Sokka," Katara told the boy. "Grandma was right," Sokka said in amazement. "You can bend air. How do you do that?" "We airbenders learn to feel the energy behind the wind, not just the breeze on our skin," the boy explained. "It's all about controlling energy." The young airbender looked down at Prince Zuko's ship, which moved swiftly through the ice valley below. "The Fire Nation is up to something," he said, frowning. "I have to go back home now. I could drop you guys back at your village, or you can come with me and I'll bring you back home later." Sokka and Katara looked at each other. They both thought of their grandmother's words. Their destinies were now tied to the young airbenders. They had committed to helping him, and they were going to see that promise through. "We're going to make sure you get back safely," Katara said. "Yeah, drop us back home later," Sokka added quickly. "Great," said the boy, obviously pleased to have his new friends along on the journey. "Then let's go home. Appa, yip yip." Appa moaned his approval, then stepped off the ice cliff, lifting his enormous bulk into the air. The 3 passengers seated on his back held on tightly as the sky bison flew over the ocean. Within a few moments, the Fire Nation ship had disappeared from view. "This is so much fun," Sokka cried as they soared through the air, in a terrifying kind of way. "Yip yip," Katara asked. "That's the command to start flying," the airbender replied, looking out ahead as warm thoughts of home filled his mind. A few hours later, the Southern Air Temple came into view. "There it is!" the boy cried excitedly, pointing at the grand temple that sat high atop a mountain. "Home! Bring us down, Appa, old buddy." Appa landed on a big open field near the base of the Southern Air Temple. Katara and Sokka dropped from the bison's back, landing hard on the ground. The young airbender drifted softly down beside them. "Katara, this field is where the flying sky bison sleep," he explained. Looking around, he saw no sky bison. "That's weird. They must all be out flying, I guess." Katara glanced all around. "Wow," she said. "I didn't know people lived so high up in the mountains." Leaving Appa, the trio hiked up the winding mountain path toward the temple. Its many towers rose majestically, each of which were topped by a gleaming spire jutting into the sky. The boy practically ran every step of the way. Sokka and Katara did their best to keep up, but they lagged behind, winded by the steep climb. Reaching the temple's courtyard, the boy dashed across the open plaza and leaped into a raised stone platform. "Hey, Jinto! Monet, I'm back!" he shouted. The only answer he got was his own voice, echoing among the towers. "Guys! Hey, guys! I want you to meet some new friends of mine." Again his shouts were met with nothing but echoes. Confused, he raced from one end of the courtyard to the other, searching. A few moments later, his 2 companions joined him in the courtyard. "Hey, Baldy, stop running so fast," Sokka said, trying to catch his breath. Katara looked around the magnificent temple. "This is where you live?" she asked in amazement. The young airbender nodded. "They must be playing a trick on me or something," he said anxiously. "Monk Gyatso is probably going to jump out at any second and try and scare me. He's the teacher responsible for me. He's kind of like my father." Katara was about to ask him a question, but realised that after all this time she had never asked the boy his name. "Is it okay if you tell me your name?" she asked curiously. "The monks name me Aang," the young airbender replied, glancing at Katara. Then he started searching the courtyard again. "Okay, guys, enough. A joke's a joke, but this has gone too far." Suddenly, something scurried out from behind a wall. "It's a spider rat!" Sokka screeched, snatching his boomerang from his pack. "They're poisonous! Everyone get behind me. I'll deal with this." No, Sokka!" Aang cried. "He's a flying lemur bat. We keep them as pets." The small white creature stopped and stared at Aang. He had long pointed ears, 2 giant wings, and a dark face with piercing amber eyes and a striped tail. Sokka put away his boomerang and leaned in close to Katara. "I didn't think there were any lemur bats left," he whispered. "Weren't lemur bats extinct a long time ago, Aang?" she asked. "Extinct?" Aang replied in shock. "What do you mean? There must be thousands of them on this mountain." It was then that Katara realised just how long Aang had been trapped inside that ice. She also realised that he had absolutely no idea how long he had been gone. "Ang, your friends were airbending monks?" she asked nervously. Ang's face suddenly brightened. "What time is it?" he asked, glancing up at the gathering dusk. "I know where they all are right now. They're in the prayer field." He bounded back down the stairs, 5 at a time. "Ang, wait!" Katara cried, chasing after him. "I have to talk to you." When Katara reached the bottom of the stairs, she found Ang staring in disbelief at a large field. He stood there, motionless, shocked by what came into view. The field was littered with bones, helmets, armour, weapons and war machines. Katara recognised the uniforms and equipment of those of the Fire Nation. Ang knew the garments that clothed the skeletons were those of the monks who had raised him. The young airbender clutched his head and shook it in despair. "Ang, I have to tell you something," Katara said softly. "I think you were in that ice for almost 100 years. After you disappeared, the Fire Nation started a war." Ang continued to stare out at the prayer field, refusing to make eye contact with her. "But I only left here a few days ago," he finally said, his voice quaking. "Ang, the Fire Nation knew that the Avatar would be born into the air nomads," Katara explained, "so they exterminated all the air nomads." Ang stumbled forward, tripped over a pile of bones, then regained his balance. He turned to face Katara, anger flashing in his eyes. "You're lying," he shouted, choked with rage. He ran out into the field and froze at the sight of a skeleton dressed in monk's robes. Around its bony neck rested a round medallion, crudely carved from wood, held in place by a necklace of beads. "This is Monk Gyasto's," Ang said, barely able to get the words out. I made it for him." Katara walked up behind Ang and placed a hand on his shoulder, hoping to comfort him. "No!" he shouted, turning swiftly to face her. Katara stumbled back, shocked by the fury in Ang's face. She backed away and watched in confusion as Ang's eyes and then his tattoos started to glow. "Ang," she said cautiously, "are you all right?" A funnel of wind began to swirl violently all around Ang, blowing bones and charred battle gear into the air. The spinning vortex pushed Katara away, but she fought against its force, trying to stay close to Ang. Arriving at the prayer field, Sokka was stunned by the sight of the small, gentle boy glowing, surrounded by a tiny tornado. "Katara, stay away from him!" he cried, battling the wind with each step. Sokka reached Katara, took her by the arm and pulled her away from Ang. The two watched in terror and amazement as Ang floated up into the air, hovering in the middle of the funnel of wind. Inside the swirling vortex, Ang felt the world start to blur. He felt confused, although not frightened, and he was not sure where he was. The landscape was still and silent, covered with a thick white mist. A scraping sound startled him. Ang walked slowly towards the sound, stepping blindly through the fog. He came face to face with an enormous beast with scaly skin. The creature was rubbing up against the rough wall, creating the scraping sound. Suddenly it stopped moving. "Avatar," the dragon said in a deep but gentle voice. "The human world and the spirit world are in danger. Where have you been? You may already be too late." Then the dragon disappeared as quickly as he had come, but Ang remained shrouded in the white mist. Somewhere far away in the distance, a girl's voice rang out. "I know you feel alone, Ang. I know you feel. My mother was taken and killed by the Fire Nation. I know you feel you don't have a family anymore, but Sokka and I can be your family, Ang. I'm your friend. I'm here. I won't leave you." The white mist started to slowly lift. The prayer field came back into Ang's view, along with Sokka and Katara, as he hovered in the air. He felt himself drift towards the ground as the winds all around him died down. He landed and felt as if he was going to pass out. Then he collapsed into Katara's waiting arms. "I'm sorry, Aang," she said. "I'm so sorry."